a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expounding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Welcome to the Expanding Reality. I'm today's guest, Mark Palmer. Some people call me Mark Steeves.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this episode, we have the creator of Alt Media United, as well as the host of My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. It is Mark Steeves. All of the ways, of course, to find him will be linked in the show notes. All of the ways to expand your experience with us here on the show will be linked down there as well. So without any further ado, let's get to this awesome episode with Mark Steeves.
Ready to go, dude.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, reptilioids, aliens, time travelers, everyone alike. If you're listening to this, welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. And of course, we have our amazing guest, Mark Steeves, on today. Mark, how the fuck are you doing, dude?
I'm doing real well. Glad to be here for the first time. Glad to be talking to you for, I think maybe the 5th or 6th, 7th, 8th time. I mean, if we're going to count the off-air conversations too. So this is going to be fun. I'm ready to get into it.
It's just going to be a hang, and I'm really looking forward to it as well. You run, of course, the amazing show My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, which I love. That is what the title of this episode will be, just simply based on that it's amazing. And I'm way more sympathetic to that lately, and you and I may get into that today. We may not. But you also do the Alt Media United, which I am a part of, which I am extremely grateful for. And dude, you just do like such an amazing job. We were just kind of chatting before on hand here, and we've had previous conversations. You've graciously had me on your show, and I'm grateful for that. And you've just been like this awesome lighthouse, man. And I just wanted to tell you how grateful I am for you, but also just let you know that I'm pumped up just to have you on my show, dude. This is great. So how's everything going with you, man?
Really well. I mean, and that's just like a nice, polite way to not, dump all my personal crap on you. But, life is average as usual. I'm just a normal guy. And that really means a lot to me to hear that, because 2 years ago, I was just a random dude listening to podcasts. I didn't know Tripoli. I didn't know Eddie Bravo. I still don't know Eddie Bravo, and now I feel like there's a tremendous amount of respect that people give me. And I like to just, be very clear in the sense that I know part of it is because I work for Sam, and part of it is because Sam's helped me get to where I'm at so much. And because of that, I said, well, I can't just be this, guy who has a show and works for Tripoli and like gatekeeper was the feeling that I was getting. And I'm like, you know what? A cooperative is the opposite of that, because it's inclusive, it's supportive, and it's voluntary, right? So when Alex Sakaris and I had the opportunity, or like the time on hand to create this, that's the direction we took it. It could have went in the direction of a network. It could have went in the direction of a production company, but I took it in the direction of a cooperative, because I felt like podcasting has been totally, and I'm not a sociologist or anything, so I don't know the official terms, but it's been very like mutually beneficial on all fronts. There's very, very minimal competition in podcasting. And I think the people who are competitive have the wrong idea of what they're really doing, because, as you've seen, there's so much room for us to share content with each other, share time with each other, and create these amazing conversations that I used to benefit so much from as a listener, and now have the opportunity of, creating and taking part in them for future listeners.
That you're 100% right. Now, I was just talking to Chris Matthew last night. We were talking about this as well, that it is this cooperative, and it's a rising tide raises all ships kind of model, which we all follow, man. We are all strong and hard on the law of abundancy, and we practice it all the time. But like you said, man, I've benefited so much just from these conversations. And that's why that whole like, oh, I'm in competition with these guys never fucking crossed my mind, dude. It is the furthest thing. I'm excited to be cooperative with you guys because y'all are absolutely incredible. Like all the times that I talk to you guys, I learn more. It gets more comfortable. Like, and you as just people, I know that we've never met face to face in person, but you're a brother, man. I mean, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think we all kind of feel this camaraderie, you know, that comes in with exploring these ideas, especially because they're fringe topics. And it's great that we can all kind of be, I guess, beacons of light for folks to come find and to find people out there having discussions, not like what you're hearing around your normal water cooler at your job. And that's I think, beneficial.
Depressing stuff, you know, like that's where you get dragged down because when you're as aware as you and I are, and I imagine all the listeners of this show are as aware as we all are, and you hear that water cooler talk being as bland and as diminutive as it is, it really just like, I don't know, for me personally, drove a stake into my heart, like, oh man, like this is the world I'm in. And it's such a relief to be, you know, with all the caveats that come with being connected to cyberspace, it's a relief to be connected to people who see the same truths. And that's not because I enjoy being in an echo chamber, but it's like really, really like, I think fundamentally human to be a part of a tribe, you know, maybe a better word, clan. Now that I say that out loud, probably the worst word you can use in today's climate. But, you know, in our small communities, in a small community of people who see the world at least in a similar way you do. You know, we don't have to see eye to eye, but I think that's what's so cool about the podcasting realm too, is like, I listened to, you know, one podcast for a couple of years, and then, you know, something changed and I found another podcast and I listened to that for a couple of years, you know, and that's now slight to the former podcast. It's just, you know, my taste changed, and that's how consensual podcasting is. It's like, you know, I'm on to the next one, new information, you know, and I hope people find that with my show, and the same thing with the guests too. Like if you listen to my show, find Brandon Thomas, and then you become like a #1 expanding reality fan, I don't care. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad I introduced you to him. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to keep everybody on my show. You know, it's like, it does what it does for me. And if it does something for you, that's a plus.
I feel the exact same. And that's why, and that's what I tell people. Look, I'm not like selling books and shit. And I don't put links to people in the show notes so that I can be like, only I can contact them and you can. It's like, no. I put all that shit out there. It's not even about me at all. That's why there aren't pictures of me and shit everywhere. It's about the guests. It's about the ideas. And this is what I promote and push. That's why I like with you guys, man. It's just all about the connection. It's all about the ideas. And go talk to these people. You know, reach out. If we have another podcaster, go check out their damn show. That's why we had you on, because I like you, but I want people to go hear your show because I like your show. And so that's like the way that this works. And it's only an expansion of ideas, you know? And back to what you said about liking a show for a little while, this is analogous to like a band or something, you know? So bands have a style, and then they exist within a certain, let's say 5 to 10 year window, if they're lucky. And then that style changes for all of society, right? Now, some folks like Green Day or Metallica can just ride that out, right? But a lot of times, a lot of your past memories, a lot of old relationships and things are wrapped up into some key songs and stuff, which is also why bands fall off. It's like, oh, I'll never listen, you know, to the Goo Goo Dolls again because my girlfriend loved that and she broke my heart. And now you're just over that band. It had nothing to do with them. It had to do with the memory you had associated with it. But what I find interesting about what you said about, and I think that a good podcaster or somebody that delivers interesting information to stay interesting is to evolve with their audience. You know, like this show, that's why it's called expanding. I wanted the verb, or always doing it. It's not finite. You know, this is a continuing process, and I grow with the audience, and I do that through sharing ideas with folks like you, man.
Well, and that's a perfect segue to my plan, to reveal my plan that in the future, the podcast will be titled "My Family Thought I Was Crazy."
I like that. Yeah. It's optimistic, right? Because it's like they changed their mind. It's like they used to, but now they're on board.
But now I'm like hanging out with Joe Rogan, and I'm in the big mansion and all that. Yeah, no, I think that's like, you know, thank you for saying all those kind things. I think that's why the show's resonated with so many people, because that title rings so true to people who are trying to expand their reality. I mean, quite honestly, most people I've found, and this isn't anything against them, the world is overwhelming in many ways, and it's not always easy to expand your reality. But I think there's a certain person or a quality in a person where you see like, oh, okay, this person is striving to improve themselves on a physical, mental, or spiritual level. And then there's another group of people who, for whatever reason, they get blocked, or they just never saw that side of life, unfortunately. And I hope my show can be a bridge to feeling more confident in that, because you like resonate with the title, like, yeah, my family thinks I'm crazy too. What am I going to do about it? And then you find out like, oh, this guy, David Way, moved out of California and went to China and became a monk, like that was an inspiring episode I did. Like, yes. Or maybe Shawn Beaupre, who had like a crazy mushroom experience and connected with Thoth. And then now his parents are like, okay, be a professional skateboarder. We understand, Shawn. We love you, like
that dude is awesome.
He is. I hope he comes on the show if he hasn't already, because I think he's going to start his own podcast soon. But either way, there's so many people out there in the world. And when you realize like, oh, wow, I'm not alone on so many different levels. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, there are people whose family thinks they're crazier than I am. Now it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like use me as the buffer. Like my family thinks I'm nuts, like if your family just kind of thinks you're crazy, then you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, my family thinks I'm batshit right now, so I may have one-upped you lately. It's been a very interesting ride, just a little peek behind the curtain with me. But what do you think the deal is psychologically with that split? What's inherent for folks to, and it doesn't even seem like half, I'll be honest with you. I don't know, from my perspective, it just seems about like an 80-20. If we're lucky, 20% of us are like us, right? But it seems like this overwhelming majority kind of follow this narrative or this script or this program. So what do you think that has to do with? Why do you think that there's a certain number of people that are always looking for truth and others, no matter what evidence is presented, won't look at it at all?
Well, I think comfortability plays a role in it, and I'm a little jaded in the sense that like where I'm from, people tend to be on the either highest end of the spectrum as far as wealth or the lowest. Like there's really not that much mid-range, and the mid-range in Connecticut, where I'm from, is pretty up there. It's not like a middle class like it is in most states. So I think here I'm a little jaded because like I've seen the disparity. I've seen the intellectuality of like those Ivy League universities up close and personal, like working around people like that and realizing like, okay, you guys aren't as intelligent as you put on. You're, filling this role. And once I realized that everybody's just playing a role, and like the impression we have of these people in these, gilded towers isn't what they'd like us to, see. It really shook me up and made me realize like, oh, okay, I can be equal to these people. Because for the longest time in my life, I was in a sort of lack mindset of like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not rich enough. All these kind of thoughts came through my mind, which creates a fear to do better. And I think most people resonate with that. Like they compare themselves to the world around them, and then they strive for better, but it's a sort of out of fear. And I think where that switched for me was when I started acting out of love. And I think that isn't exactly the incentivized modus operandi for our society. I think our society incentivizes that fear mindset more than it incentivizes that love mindset. I think you could still get to the truth from the fear mindset, but I think there's a certain quality to, I guess you would say, agape, which is like not love for yourself or your community, but like love on a metaphysical, higher realm, sort of love for all. I think when you connect with that, you start to really erase those boundary lines that society creates, and you start to see the bigger picture, the whole, right? And it's a feeling that pushes you towards understanding more and more because we're all curious. And I think that love energy is something that unfortunately most people are incentivized out of diving into deeper. You know, everybody loves in the sense of like they love themselves or they love somebody in their life. But to love the whole world, I think, is an energy that carries you towards something greater than yourself because you're making a decision in that moment. And at every time you push that feeling forward of self-sacrifice in the sense of like, not that you're going to be a martyr, but that your immediate little toilings and all the little things you have to get done in your life become less and less important in the wider, grander scope of things. And when you can align those toilings, those things you do daily with that greater scope of things, I think people who are in that fear mindset are like, what is this guy or gal doing? Like, you know, it just comes off strange because people are taught that the world is a certain way. And when you really learn to, I don't know, feel past that, I think it happens to people by accident through trauma or through isolation or through that feeling I described of like knowing I was smart, but seeing what I was up against and trying to justify those odds in some way. And a whole happy heaping help of cannabis definitely helped out, if I could butcher that. But yeah, I don't know. I think cannabis and love, man, really were the two things that vibrated me towards this other understanding that my family thinks I'm crazy for, you know, and that comes from like how I view politics, how I view society, how I view dieting, how I view just my emotions and how like I respond to certain things. Like the other day, my aunt asked me like, what's going on, Mark? You know, kind of like, what's new? That was the question she asked. What's new? And I was real honest with her. I love my aunt. I was real honest with her. I said, if I told you, I mean, I don't know what I think about on a given day is not, you know, the average person thinks about. And she got so upset. She was like, what do you mean? You think you're so smart blowing smoke up your butt? Like, you know, like, and I'm like, no. I'm just saying, like, you know, you're not going to think about ley lines or stone alignments or, you know, the ancient history of this continent we're on. Like, and that's what I've been thinking about this week on Jocelyn. So, you know,
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she hit me with the, well, why does that matter? Like why would it matter to me? You know, and I'm really paraphrasing this because it happened 2 weeks ago, but my thought was like, well, it does matter. You're just not aware of why it matters. And you interact with ley lines and these stone alignments throughout your week because you drive by some of them, you know, at least the ones that I've noticed. So it's like you do this does affect you on a really, really subtle level. And that's what I'm usually concerned with, is that other level of reality that the average person isn't. So help me out here. Throw me the lifeboat.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel, though, that those people that are out there, including family members, man, I mean, it's like this system, whatever the hell this place is, you know, and I say this all the time, I've been questioning the actual substance of reality itself. Like, what the fuck is this place, right? But one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that the adversaries here, although they're large in number, they're supposed to be that way to stand out, to be so ridiculous, as to be the obvious not way to go. And it's almost like it's set up here to lead people to this conclusion. Now, some people may play a role here, and you might look at them as like non-player characters or something like that, or just artifacts of the Matrix or whatever. But it does feel like that there's an overwhelming adversity here, and that it does take the hero's journey to kind of step into those roles and to say, man, there's got to be something more to this, and to kind of follow that and pursue it. Even and especially at the threat of ostracization, right? At the threat of being thrown out of the tribe because you're a wacko. But it's not like that anymore. It is a huge switch. And I do think that my family thought I was crazy is great. And that's probably going to be truer than we know coming up, because this great awakening or this grand shift in consciousness is definitely occurring. And I think we can all agree with this. You see people that are having an awesome time with this, which are folks like me and you, because it's like, awesome, we got a bunch of new people to talk to and things to talk about and ideas to explore with a greater input, because there are more people contributing to the conversation. And so, but the people who really have their shit figured out, air quotes for the audio only audience, then they're having a really rough time with this right now. They're having a really rough time with their belief systems, their religious systems, and what they thought their solid, rigid world was based on is crumbling to the ground all around them. And I feel bad for those people, man, because they made decisions to make really hard line choices in their line in the sand, and they lived by those quite well. But now it feels like with this shift, all of this stuff is just crumbling down, man. I mean, do you empathize with that, or have you seen any of that in your experience?
Yeah, it's over here where I'm at, it feels like people have leaned into the propaganda and like just, gone with it because, like I said, there's that level of comfortability where it's still not affecting them. Yeah, the masks are uncomfortable, but so's their politics. Like they're totally comfortable living with that political mindset. That's the politics of it. I think people who are waking up are the people who aren't comfortable, who are like, oh wow, this is becoming a lot. I have to, do the VP, and I got to get the, show that everywhere I go, and get the jab, and the cooties are everywhere. Give me a break already. That's kind of how I feel about it. But at the same time, my family, for the most part, there doesn't seem like they're ready to do Thanksgiving or Christmas this year because of all the BS, and so I don't think many people have woken up to it. I think they're just kind of, unfortunately, going along with whatever's going to make things go back to normal again.
That's never gonna fucking happen. We know that.
But and this isn't quite my forte. But what I will say briefly about it is like my thought, and I was saying this to Tara yesterday, is like they're going to push this as far as they can, obviously, for the cryptocurrency, the blockchain, the transhumanist smart city future. But I think that's where it stops, is the cities. So what I was telling my girlfriend is like, I hope you enjoyed the last time we were in New York City, because that was it. Like that was the last time we're ever going to be in New York City as it kind of used to be. And it's still, for the past 5 years has been weird. Last year when I was there was pretty nice, actually. It was nice in the sense that like it was summertime. Nobody was forcing me to wear a mask when I was in certain places, but for the most part, everybody was wearing a mask. And then like the year before that, when it was just totally normal, it was just, in my opinion, like I wouldn't know it. I'm not a New Yorker. I just go there every now and then. It was pretty chaotic. And like, I liked how calmed down it got, but I don't think that they're going to be able to manage that chaos. I think it's going to go back to that chaos, and it's going to be mitigated with these new smart technologies and watching people and pushing people into a police state. And for folks like us, I think the imperative is going to be just to not go to places like that, like to avoid places like that and live your life in the more off-grid rural areas where those changes aren't going to be so quick to, affect the average, rural and country town. I don't think they're going to be so quick with the 5G grid. I think we're looking at 50, 60 to maybe even 100 years before that stuff gets, globalized. Even if it even does, I don't know. Like I said, this isn't my forte. I didn't want to go into it too far, but like that seems to be the ever-present fear right now, and the average person has no idea that that's coming. They just see it as like, oh, everybody's been getting sick, we need to do this to stop people from getting sick. And folks in our community are like, no, they're warming us up for some huge great reset, and in my opinion, I'm like trying to stay as positive as I can, as centered in love as I can. And I think that that doomsday of like a technocratic globalist, hellscape isn't a reality for me, and I'm going to gravitate away from it. Like that's just the truth for me. I can't say what's going to happen for the whole world, but like I know on a personal level, I'm not going to feed into that fear. I'm not going to learn all about the little like ins and outs of the security state and the smart cities, because I don't want to gravitate towards that. I don't want my life to gravitate towards that. I'm not going to be the, hero John Connor who fights the smart city and defeats Skynet. That's just not me. I'd rather connect with the mountain spirits and connect with the river spirits while they're still able to even interact with us, because they've been bogged down. I mean, you've talked to Michael Wan. He's talked about this 400-year spell that they put on the largest river, or on the East Coast, not the largest river in the United States, but the largest and oldest river in the East Coast, which is the Susquehanna River. And, they quite literally took it and locked it down energetically. Yep. So that's where I've been like interested in lately, is how do I connect with these land spirits that have been calling to me my whole life? Really, I've always been kind of fascinated with this sort of thing. And it wasn't only till really recently that I've begun to understand how to fully interact with this other world that I've only sensed for maybe the past 5 years.
Well, I, for one, am going to start a GoFundMe for people to contribute to the finances of a movie of you being replaced as the lead in Terminator type situation. Because, dude, just to see you try and save the world, just rolling up blunts while you're like riding on a motorcycle, I really want to see this film. So maybe we'll start something with that. But to what you said about it being controlled in the cities, I think you've really hit on a massive idea here that actually is brilliant. So I kind of want to pick that apart a little bit. So whenever we talk about choice and free will, what I've been saying from the beginning, if you want to feed into this, and a lot of people say this isn't just me, but for my audience, we've been going on this journey for a while, that if you want to feed into that, you're absolutely welcome to, but you don't have to. Like it's coercion, but it's still your choice, right? Ultimately. And to the larger scale of this, taking it to where there are people, admittingly, that don't want fuck all to do with anything extra. They want to fit in, they want to fall in line, they want to be a part of that, and that's fine. And what's interesting about it is maybe this is the ultimate kind of like play in your own yard kind of thing, with this idea that people in these smart cities, which, yeah, they scare the shit out of you in the Great Reset and this Klaus Schwab douchebag and all that. They can scare the shit out of you about it if you want to get scared about it. And just even aside off of that, to what you said about not even researching smart cities and learning how they operate and work, because you don't even want to be that familiar with them because it's that far out of your reality. Fucking awesome. I adore that perspective, because that's what I'm saying. Like, to this idea, all the people like us have a beautiful place in nature to go. All the people who don't give a fuck all about nature and just want to fall in line in the system, in their cars and their football games and all that shit, which again, there's nothing wrong with. But if they want to do that, they're actually being provided a place to go do that. And even better, it's going to be a totalitarian regime that locks you down, that tracks everywhere you go, that you're going to be social credit score, govern me harder, daddy, right? And so it's like this idea of, well, you do get what you want, and we get the ultimate freedom because they're going to just leave us the fuck alone. And they're going to not only do that, but they're going to provide like like those lamps that you can put outside where the flies attract to it and they get zapped. That's what they do for douchebags. So they put these douchebag city lamps all over the place, and then, just stay the fuck out of them and you're going to be just fine. It's the ultimate choice. I love this idea. I love it.
Well, and I think, there's a lot I agree with in what you just said, but there's a lot I disagree with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be like in that thought mindset in the first place. Because, I think that's right. We have to be rested on our own will and responsible for our actions and the consequences of our actions. But at the same time, these governmente, agents, if we'll just simplify it down to that label. They're working on, a grid of control, which I don't think is going to, afford us the liberty of just like, oh, yeah, we can just hang out in the woods while they're going to try to push people into the cities, force them into the cities and hunt down whoever's in the natural spaces under the guise of like, oh, well, we need to protect the environment. Right. So not that I'm like putting my head in the sand, I'm going to go start a hippie commune and run around in the woods. But like, that's where my focus needs to be. If I want to live in touch with nature, I need to take on the globalists on that front. Like, how are they going to be messing with, and if what you say is true, which what I didn't agree with is like, it's okay. Like,
I know
it's your show. So
that's my favorite part of it, is that it's okay.
I don't know. I'm like, I have to listen to my mom and my family go like, oh, football, this and that. Like, they love football. And I don't like sports at all. So I don't see that as a positive. I see it as like, oh, there's some conspiracies in there. And yeah, we're going to offend a bunch of people by getting into that topic. So maybe we'll save it for another day.
Yeah.
But so I appreciate it, and I understand why you say that, but like I'm very radical about that kind of stuff, and that's why my family thinks I'm crazy, because when the sports game is on, I'm like, fuck this, like. So there is an attitude of that, and an element of that, and I don't want to totally turn around and go back on what I said, but I do think that ignorance is not bliss. So not that I don't want to know all the ins and outs of the smart cities, but I want to know everything I can to keep myself out or keep myself safe from whatever's coming from that. Right. And I don't know, man, I don't want to, again, gravitate into the fear mindset, because that's kind of what we're talking about and why it's detrimental. But there is that element of like, where am I going to go? I was born into a place that was it's kind of like stuck in between New York City and Boston. And it doesn't seem like a good time to go and like just drive out in the middle of nowhere right now. Like, I'm kind of in a point where I want to find a new place to live, but nowhere seems right. So that's kind of my mindset. I know when I was younger, I'm like, yeah, cities, I would love to be in a city, hang out with friends all the time, be around people all the time, always doing fun stuff. But over time, as I've grown, I've gotten to really respect the peace and the comfort of being out in your own rural area. When I say own, I mean your own as in like you look around and no one is there. You're all the way out there on your own, Like, I think there's enough space on this planet for all of us to have a little piece of land that we can steward and maintain. How are we going to get there? I don't know, because it seems to me like the globalists, like we kind of said, are pushing people into smart cities and then clearing the forests and leaving all access, only based on their permission. You can't go there unless you're allowed to, unless you're a researcher, unless you're a park ranger, I'm not cool with that. I don't want to be a refugee. I don't want to be a terrorist just for going into the forest, like it's just a bold new world we're living in, a brave new world, I should say.
And you're absolutely right. Now, I am a chronic optimist, and sometimes, to a default, probably, but I'm going to just explore this a little bit further with you, because I think that the only part that we diverge in your idea is where they start hunting people. I do think that they're definitely going to coerce, because they already do that, right? But I do think that they're going to coerce as many people into the cities, if they're established in this model, right, as they can, of course, because that's power for them, that's workforce, that's labor, that's all that stuff. And that's why the systems in place maintain this bread and circus and shit, make it enticing. Same thing with the people that got the boop boop. That's the same thing. That's still like this, make sure you do this and make sure, and it's more ridiculous and more ridiculous, but it becomes so to us as well. And so the thing about it is that maybe that's part of this. It's to divide this mental split, and why things feel so weird right now is because the split is happening further and further, and it's not a split like race or anything like that. What it is it's a split in lifestyle choice. So it's got nothing to do with race or sexual affiliation or orientation or anything like that. It just has to do with, okay, do you want to live free and out in the, nature and do more things that commune with nature and on all of that stuff? Or do you want to live in this, shit city and just have everything like fed to you and all your rights stripped and we'll just make all your decisions for you? It just seems like that maybe, and that's why I got so excited about the model. I was kind of like, yeah, you guys go live over there. And then maybe all these places that they keep us out of now is to keep the douchebags out later for whenever they do roll this out. And that's now what we have access to. It's like they're keeping it safe for us. You know, maybe it's that like fun, you know, maybe it'd be that awesome. I don't know.
I like it. No, I'm with it. I think it's, you know, it's interesting being in the conspiracy, you know, mindset, and only have interacted with like an actual conspiracy a couple times. You know what I mean? Like we're really like looking at these things from a speculative and historical basis. Like these are things that we're discussing based on other things that other people have said, you know. Right. We weren't at 9/11 on ground zero. We weren't in, you know, Dallas when JFK got shot, but we can discuss those things and gain, you know, some insight and have greater clarity for the world that we're in. And when it comes to something like that, I think, you know, we all know what it's like to be in a city, and we all know what it's like to be, for the most part, I hope, in a natural space. And the contrast is pretty apparent.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the energy trap. You know, more people are born into that disconnected state, then things like football, then things like gambling, then things like, you know, drinking in excess and you know, wasting time. I would say it's a waste of time. Just kind of like living in revelry for the moment, you know, which is great. I'm all for living for the now, but that's because I'm like constantly striving for something, you know. Yeah. There's this sense of like complacency, but like happiness and joy in that, like, oh well, we're just all just worker bees and there's nothing that we're, you know, like when you're in that area, it feels like a loose trap, right? Yeah, that's the term that I feel like people are vibing with lately. And you know, it's not always obvious to the people who are in it, you know, and they have like a philosophy of like nihilism that they're not really aware that they have, you know, like they don't even know that that's what they're vibing with, this kind of nihilistic philosophy. And I think what you and I are idealists, you know, we see the world for the ideals, not for the lows. We see it for the highs and what we can strive for. And being an artist or being a creative, you know, you kind of want to put something out there and always constantly make it as best as you can and improve upon that, you know, whatever it is, music, art, a podcast, right? And I think there's something about conformity that this city brings too, where that is suffocated a little bit, you know, because it's just something about being in a crowd, you know, this crowd that it doesn't cater to the enlightenment that I think we're seeking through this podcast, the listeners of this podcast, and through the conversations that you've had, many with a bunch of brilliant people. I mean, obviously there's a sense of like, I don't know everything and I could know more, right?
Absolutely.
I think people are being kind of bred to get that out of them. I don't know. And that's why I feel like there's a hunting down, because the empire, maybe it's not a physical hunting down, but the empire, as it will, like the ever-present empire, is never for that sort of enlightenment. They're always looking to turn, you know, you down a dead end, so you never reach that point. Control. Because there's something so powerful in that I think threatens the very core of what is going on with these smart cities, with the empire, with the governmente, the temporal control, you know. And that's why ley lines, stone rows, all these buildings have become so fascinating for me lately, because those objects, those buildings, these things on the earth, you know, are literally the skeleton of our living planet. You know, like we both have minerals in our bodies as our skeletons. It gives us form. It gives us rigidity and durability. So we're not like a slug who can just, unfortunately get stomped on and his whole life is gone in an instant. I was just taking a walking stick, and sanding it. And there's this poor little slug on there who got sanded away. And I felt so bad that I like smeared him, but 'tis the nature of its being. And I think the earth is not at all a slug. It's an incredibly, incredibly, incredibly complex organism that we're all a part of. And I think as creators or creative beings, we can add to that skeletal structure of the earth in the form of buildings, in the form of stone structures. And I think just like our nervous system kind of converges with our skeletal system in the sense that the pathways that our skeletal system creates are like the foundation for the other channels of different parts of our bodies, and nervous system being the one that carries electricity. It's responsible for our thoughts, and like everybody always talks about how we're however much percent water, and so is the earth, right? So there's a very clear reflection here, a microcosm, macrocosm, if you will. Your body, if you understand how it works, you can extrapolate that onto the world around you. So are we starting to get the picture here with the virus and how they've warped our sense of how we operate on a microcosm level and a macrocosm level, and vice versa, on and on and on? There's a sort of negative percussion reflection that goes on where they warp our sense of how our bodies work, and then that in turn warps our sense of how our planet works, and in turn warps our sense of how our body works. So I think getting down to that root of agape that I brought up at the beginning, and understanding yourself on an intimate level, and I mean trusting your intuition over the authority that's been imposed on you when you were born and raised and grew up, and we're told, no, you're not smart enough to think for yourself. These books will show you, and you get a book shoved in your face and a pencil in your hand, and you're meant to, follow the orders and bow down to that authority, when really your inner self, your inner child, your inner voice is always connected to the higher and the all and the, omniscience or the omnipotence. And I think, people use the term like the Akashic record to discuss that, right? But what I've seen in a hermetic way is like when you understand things on a microcosm level and extrapolate that to a macrocosm, that's a big tool in the toolbox. Being able to use that hermetic law was essential to where I was and where I am now, So I think how the ley lines, how the skeletal structure of the planet works, I'm not 100% certain on it yet. But given what we know about our skeletal structure, I think it's very important, and I think that there's a certain manipulation that's gone on with buildings where they create structures that we gravitate around. And it's like a, prophecy. They're like prophesizing what the future that they want it to be and then putting it into action, And I think that's what's so interesting about the whole virus thing. It's like, it fits right into the climate change stuff and this idea of like an infection or, and really, I think the term parasite is the most important one to use. Virus, no, but parasite, yes, there is clearly a parasite here in the human collective consciousness and in the planet. It's not a virus, it's a parasite. It's this being that exists because the rest of the organism is in a state of dis-ease, right? I think that's primarily what we're dealing with, and why they put so much emphasis on the idea of a virus or a foreign invader that's harming us is because it fits in psychologically to that model of authority and control paradigm that they've presented to us for however many hundreds of years in order to keep us, as sheeple. But the parasite model versus the virus model, I think, brings more clarity to it, because we understand now that our state of disease is not fatal. It's not, it's not infinite. It's totally, there's a solution, and it's removing that parasite, or bringing that parasite, out of the homeostasis of the whole, because its presence is like magnetizing the rest of the organism into a disease state. I mean, does that mean parasites shouldn't exist? I don't know. I'm not gonna, they exist for a reason, but I think on a huge macrocosm level, there is like a parasitic planetary force here on the planet doing something. And I don't know if the only solution is to like eject it out into space or out past the dome, however you want.
Whatever you think it is, right? Yeah.
Whatever your model is for the world, I think that is more true than this idea of like a virus and,
It's kind of like the virus is a great metaphor for the ultimate lie. And it's kind of like the great Hegelian dialect, but on a huge scale, right? We talk about problem, reaction, solution all the time, where they create the problem. We, as the populace, the mass populace, that 80% we were talking about, responds. And then they're like, oh, well, we'll just do this. And a lot of it has to do with stripping you of your more things that make you authentic and you. I won't even say your rights and freedoms, because those should be innate. So, but what's interesting about this model is that it works on a huge scale. Number one, you lie to them. The problem is that they don't know who they really are, what this place really is. So you lie to them at their core, and it only takes a few generations to do this. There was this interesting study with monkeys I'll tell you about here in a second, but it's interesting that then your problem turns into the reaction of, well, then we have disease. We have these issues in society. We have these divides against all of us, this unauthenticity that we gravitate towards, simply because we don't know what we really are while we're here, but someone else does know this, and they're the ones that put the control system in place. And then the solution to that is to then further push this totalitarian thing. So it's like that model, but on a huge scale, having to do with everything. It's not even in these microcosms, because as above, so below. So maybe that idea as above would also be on the biggest scale possible, which is everything. So the study about monkeys, and why this is interesting whenever we talk about people who lie to us about our past and we don't really know where we come from or who we are, but someone else does. There was a study done to where they put, I think, 4 monkeys in a cage with a ladder leading up to the top of the cage where there were bananas suspended at the top, okay? Now, what happened is when one monkey went on the ladder, he climbed it to get up to the bananas, the scientists or the researchers sprayed the other monkeys that were off of the ladder with cold jets of water and just made them miserable and freaked out until they grabbed that monkey and pulled him down and beat the piss out of him, right? So then what happened is the next time any monkey went up there for that, they grabbed the monkey and beat the piss out of him because they got sprayed with the water and they could remember that. They pulled one monkey away, then another monkey would come in, and then it would repeat the same process. Now, eventually, there were no monkeys that had been sprayed with water whatsoever in this cage, but all of them beat the piss out of any monkey that climbed that ladder to get to those bananas. So what's interesting about this is that we don't even know why we react the way that we do. We don't even know what the purpose of the way that we're feeling is. And now I think a lot of folks like me and you, it's intuitive that something's not right here, that there's something better that we can explore as far as a concept, and everyone else is really not only asleep, but completely opposed to discomforting themselves with the idea of changing the perfect system that they've got, right? And so whenever you look at models like this on scales that big, that's why we question the things like the shape of the earth and shit. That's why we question like what the fuck is going on here, It's because we get to a place in our research, and I'm sure with you're the same way. You get to your place here and you're like, okay, well, maybe all of it's fucking bullshit, and maybe they're lying about everything, and then what are we? And then you're left to your own devices to figure that out on your own. And it's interesting, man. It's just an interesting model. And I'm glad you pointed it out. So that's really cool.
Well, and, thank you for adding to it, because you're reminding me, that that little allegory that I put out there was incomplete. And I think you're absolutely right that viruses are analogous to lies in many ways, and I think that, everything I've learned about them is that they're they're these RNA type, like non-organic things that attach to organic things to complete that DNA structure, because it's missing. It's like one strand, and in theory, if it had two, it would be a more complex organism. Thus, that is its life cycle. It goes, it tries to combine and grow itself. How true that is, I don't know. But I think when we're getting into the science of DNA and genes and all of this stuff, it is very murky, and it comes back to some weird stuff from ancient times, where they're talking about chimeras. They're talking about, creating man, and it being, sort of a weird, like, Dr. Moreau process with like parts of animals, But I think what we're really talking about there is alchemy, and how we are, one part mineral, one part vegetable, another part animal, and a fourth part, God or creation, or, if you want to look at from the elements, where air, fire, water, earth, and ether, I think no matter what culture you're looking at, there's a sort of holistic understanding there as to the kind of collective nature of reality, where we're like a sum of all of the parts. And I think adding certain materials like graphite that could possibly blacken the gold that is our soul's potential to that lead Saturnian state, that could be an element here. I'm not sure. I'm not, again, trying to like insert fear where there isn't a need for it, but that definitely feels like part of it. It feels to me like the people that we've trusted as doctors have taken the holistic model of healing and inverted it, and then B, suppressed anybody who wasn't following that inversion. Now, within that, there's been a lot of great things done. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have been helped by hospitals, but I don't think that it's anything different than what those holistic doctors could have done if their processes weren't inverted and then suppressed. Like me, I have a part in my wrist made out of cobalt chrome because I broke my wrist on a skateboard. Like, I regret that. I want to get that thing out. I feel like it's not really a part of my body, but that choice was pushed upon me by the hospital in that state of pain, and I went with it, and I do regret it in some ways, but I think that possibly they were right, possibly they were wrong. There's like an actual experience there for me where I'm torn. I'm not just somebody who's observing this from the outside. Like, I am a victim of the medical malpractice industry. Or another way to look at it is that I've been healed by the medical industry, right? There's two ways to look at it, but either way, that thing they put in my wrist, not cheap, probably more expensive than my car. And B, like, it's cobalt, like, comes from Africa, in like a mine, like some kid probably helped mine this out of the ground, an ore that they went and refined and turned into cobalt, because cobalt doesn't degrade inside of it's biocompatible. It's one of these biocompatible minerals, like titanium, is another one that they use. I think when you see that, you start to understand the whole picture of things, it can leave you with an unsettling feeling. But at the same time, there's that reverse that, like, oh wait, everything is kind of organic too. Like, even the computers we're using are made from things that come from the earth. So not everything has that moral component. I think it's us as the interactor or the creator that has that moral component that gets added to it. And I think it's important, I guess, for us to not equate that moral component with the objective, when it's really a subjective thing, in the sense of like it's you're bringing that element, or whoever interacted with it too is bringing that element. And I'm not saying that there aren't evil people out there, but like if you're vibrating on love, there is no interaction with evil possible, in my opinion. I think love supersedes that. And it even supersedes like the materials that were possibly created for malintent. I mean, a weapon is a great example of that. A weapon can hurt somebody and ruin a family's life and destroy people's lives, but at the same time, it can protect someone's life. It could save someone's life. And I think that's like the moral dilemma of our age and of our like use of all of these materials. And what the powers that be want is for less and less and less people to be in on that decision, because the more people that are in on that decision, the more it's going to gravitate towards love. That's why they're just trying to control it down to the smallest group of people, because they're the most manipulative or manipulatable, and they're able to, keep these people in that fear mindset. And if those fear mindset people are the people at the top of the pyramid, well, then the whole world's kind of pushing towards that way, So I don't know if I'm very coherent with my point, but maybe you can sort of back me up there.
I back you up 100%. And you were very coherent with it, because I hear you. Now, back to the medical specifically. Whenever people talk about, so Greg Carwood actually, and I'm not going to tell his story, guys. Go check out his show. But he just had a little girl. Congratulations to him and his wife. They're doing great. They had kind of an interesting time with that. But again, I'm not going to tell his story. But even then, they're very natural, very holistic body. If it weren't for medicine, things would have been a lot different. Or for, traditional medicine, things would have been a lot different. So what's interesting about this whole perspective is that we want the most natural thing possible, right? But I think what we're really looking for is the most authentic and the most honest. So the problems that we have as who we are, like I definitely will include myself in that, is going to like a hospital or something, is that we understand a lot of lies that occur there. But there's also some truths there too. But the way we feel about the system and the lies outweighs our ability to trust the average person within that system that it's going to be for our best benefit, or that at least something nefarious isn't going to happen, right? I mean, they charge you $10,000 for a bag of saline, right? Even that, it's like, come on, it's just shitty. But there's a lot of distrust within that. But what I hope that we're all moving to is this place to where we can incorporate these ideas with each other rather than battle each other. But it's all based on whatever works best. And all of that is subjective, meaning that now you're offering opportunities to everyone. There's no one cure for everything. Everyone operates in a different way. Everyone requires something different to be healed, and especially even in order, because now we're talking about mental health. All of those things play a factor in the physiological makeup of your body. And so to viruses and things like that, those are in some people's observation, some scientists, some doctors. I think that it's, we talk about terrain versus germ theory. The germ theory kind of lends itself to just on its origins, on how it's pushed so hard, on what occurs when that happens. As long as you zoom out from it just a little bit, you could see what's wrapped up in that narrative, that you're icky, you're dangerous. And that's what is interesting, just to now go to the transhuman part of it, with that whole thing as well, because it seems like the less authentic they want everything, the better off they are. But we crave authenticity. And so that's where really like this split will occur in the whole transhuman thing. But also, and Jim Gale and I were talking about this, we don't want to throw all the technology out. It's not that it's bad. We could use it in the future. We're using it now. We kind of work within the matrix. But what you want to do is get rid of the matrix and keep all their toys, like keep all the shit, because there are people out there that do want to, there are great nurses that are just out there to help. And there are great people out there that are designing technologies that do wonderful things for humanity and that don't have a nefarious end to them. The problem is the people that fund them, who owns them, and then what that they're probably appropriated for. I heard on Matrix Assassins, great show, by the way, they were talking about Dell computers and how they gave a Dell computer to all of these kids as a free computer, but it really served as a data collection and spying apparatus for the households of every individual that they gave those computers to. So it's kind of like that. It's like, well, what do we trust? We dig the computers. It's a nice thing, but it wasn't done altruistically. They gave people a computer so that they could be spied on, not to do something nice for these children who maybe, get an education out of it as well. But it's got a nefarious end to it, which is where this lack of trust comes in. So I'm with you on the split of like, do we trust the medical community? How do we integrate it with more homeopathic strategies? And I think just really the answer is just everybody to be honest with each other. We take the best of all of it, because none of it's 100% right and none of it 100% works for anyone. So you just get a little bit more honest with yourself, society,
Well, and that's the big, the economics topic. And it's like, are we living in an economy that incentivizes honesty? I would say probably not. Right.
Absolutely not.
So that's, I think, one of the larger issues, but also governmente is totally responsible for that in so many ways. I mean, just the, and everything I've been learning about the indigenous cultures here and the way they handled, their affairs with one another wasn't all perfect either. I mean, they would fight each other, kill each other, do all kinds of stuff, and come together in great, times of like peace and like huge, like, a confederacy, as they called it, of people who came together for good things, and I think that spirit was sort of hijacked a little bit in the founding of this country. That's some of what I've been looking into, and it's all sort of new to me. I don't want to come out and talk about a lot of it, but I definitely think that we're finding out more and more that the authenticity that you're talking about, I think it's something that permeates from the land. I think that skeleton that I was talking about, I think they hijack it with these buildings to create that disconnection, and thus that unauthenticity or, phoniness is more permissible for the average person. And they can get into that sort of manipulated reality that the empire creates. Whereas in the past, when that skeletal structure was weaker, people were like, no, I'm going to go start my own group. I'm going to start my own community, And now they've kind of, like, in the past 50 years, they've kind of like pushed people away from that, with the whole idea of like a cult always ending up as a bad thing, which I don't disagree with. I think there's so many examples of cults that have ended very terribly. Yeah, so I'm not pushing for that, but I think there's definitely an aspect of like intentional community living that you don't hear about. Like, there's all kinds of intentional communities across the United States where people come together for the common goals of just living in a place with food and happy people and everybody's getting along. I mean, and it's not race based, it's not religious based, it's just human based, and they don't show that. They never show that. They show people, in $1 million houses who are isolated from each other, and they say that's the ideal. We need to strive for that. You need to strive to be in the mansion and the yacht and the jetliner, and they never show you these people who are living excellent lives. I mean, from when we had our first conversation, it sounds to me like you have a very cool setup over there.
Great
and
setup.
And like that's something that people should strive for, is being connected to the land, having self-sufficiency, having a community, depending on your personality. Some people like being a little more isolated or a little more space. I'm probably one of those people for sure. I don't know if that's just a reaction from where I've grown up, being kind of in the megalopolis, as I call it, but it's like, it's definitely a lot more available than they'd like us to think, I think.
Completely agree. And I think that what you crave is the option of isolation, but the access to people when you want it. And that's the same thing that I like. We have that out here, but we live in, what we prefer more than the percentage of as if we would have to escape to it, like a lot of people do, right? They leave the city to go camping for the weekend, but they're kind of stuck there. Not really, because you can do whatever you want, but they feel stuck there, and so that's why they haven't moved yet. But then you go back to the city, and then you're involved in that environment. We just did the flip-flop. We can go in the city anytime we want, and we do that, but it's like we get to have it like we want, which is in small doses. It's perfect. It's like I'm not forced to go. I'm just like, and all right, that was fun. Let's get back out, and go hang out with some donkeys. So we're probably going to wrap it up here, man. I feel like I could talk to you forever about everything. We didn't even get to like the quickening and the observer effect. And I just think that you and I just should do this every now and then, man, to unravel the mysteries of the universe, or at least talk about them a little bit.
I'm down. Thank
Cool.
you. Yeah, this was definitely fun. I didn't know that those were on the docket for topics to talk about, but anytime you want to have me on to get into that, I think the observer effect is something I've played around with in my life, and I've called it the law of attraction. But really, I mean, if we're gonna really get down to it, it's all the same thing. It's like you put awareness or intention into something, and that's it. Like that's everything you do in the world at any given moment. You're putting awareness and intention out. Like if you're not in control of that, then someone else might be, and you should consider like who is, and like why you're doing what you're doing, and whether those things are helping you with those higher intentions that listening to the Expanding Reality podcast is starting to bring into the picture of like, oh, this is possible. I don't have to work this shitty 9-to-5 job, and I can create a life outside of the grid for myself. And that's, to me, the observer effect is like observing the reality that you want to live in, and then getting there because you kind of harmonize with that frequency rather than the frequency of your immediate circumstances.
Mark Steeves, the host of My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, creator of the absolutely incredible Alt Media United, and I will be linking all of the ways to find you down in the show notes. An incredible conversation, brother. I can't thank you enough, and you are welcome here any damn time you want.
Thank you, sir. And I will most likely put this out as a swapcast a couple weeks after you release it. And so for folks listening on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, please go over and show some love to my man, Brandon Thomas, host of the Expanding Reality podcast. And you can find him on altmediaunited.com, the only podcast cooperative you need to know about. I mean, are there any others? I don't think so, but we're the ones that you should trust, because we're all about the truth.
Yeah, or at least a pursuit of it. We'll at least be honest with you if we know it or not, right? But dude, thank you so much, man. Let's definitely do this again, brother.
Right on.
Want to give a huge shout out to Mark Steeves for coming by and spending some good vibes on us. That dude is just chill as hell. His show is wonderful, guys. Check the show notes down there to follow him a little bit more. He's just got an awesome perspective. We love his energy. And as you can tell from that, if you didn't know who Mark was before this, there you go. He's a great dude. And welcome to his experience of reality. It's an awesome one. So join him on that ride. So as for this show, guys, go down in the show notes and check out expandingrealitypodcast.com. Down there is links to all of the socials, everything that you need to know to expand your experience on the show here with us, right next to Mark's stuff. So go down there, find Mark Steeves, go down there, find our shit. There you go. That's where it's at. Go out into this beautiful place, whatever the fuck this is, guys. And y'all just be nice to everybody that you come across. Pick up a piece of litter, buy a coffee or a meal in line behind you or around you or anything like that. Just be cool in this little minor way. It makes a massive impact. And I know, because some of you have let me know that you do, said that you do this and you write in, and I really appreciate that. So great job, guys. I'm very proud of you. Soul Tribe represent. Also, while you're out there representing, get the fuck out of the left-hand lane. It's annoying as shit, and we all know that by now. But beyond all of that, guys, go out into this beautiful place, whatever the fuck it is, and y'all just be a good to one another. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.